Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our latest Ask the Expert session. As you can see, I'm with a few people today, Chrish and Brenda. I will let them introduce themselves in a few seconds, but today we're going to be talking all about business strategy and processes, and these three guys are very much the area of the world that they work in, so we'll talk about that. If you've got any questions, do put it in the comments. I'll put it to the guys as well. Do have a few kind of pre and advanced questions, and then we'll go from there. So probably the best place to start is kind of find out who we're with today. So I'll start with Chrish Iredale. If you could go first, Chrish. I need to double name everybody so we don't get mixed up with Chris's.
Two Chris's on the call today. Hello, my name's Chrish Iredale. I'm a business growth coach and mentor in my practice, Thriven. And me and my associate team, we have a series of programs to help any size of business, any business model with their growth aspirations, whether those are frustrations or whether it's the challenges of quick scale up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chrish. Iredale, can we go to Chris Parker then now?
Hi everyone, my name is Chris Parker. I am the owner and founder of Combined Minds, and I do continual improvement coaching and consultancy, and a little bit of mentoring as well. Everything I do is all about taking the operational processes and making them work and stripping them back and making them more efficient.
Thank you, Chris. Perfect. And last but definitely not least, Brenda.
At least my name's not Chris. That would be really confusing. Hi everyone, my name is Brenda Etchells. I basically work with businesses a bit like Chris of all sizes, helping them to develop their strategy and more importantly to actually execute the strategy. So for the bigger businesses, it's like working with everybody from frontline staff up to SLT, making sure everybody's engaged in the process. With smaller businesses, it's much more working one-to-one in a coaching and mentoring space, helping them to figure out have a plan in place for how they're going to grow their business.
Perfect. Thank you, Brenda. And like I said, anybody who's watching, if you've got any questions, please do put it to us, and I'll put it to the guys. So I'm going to start with a few questions that we've had in advance. So I guess it's a really obvious place to start. What is strategy and what are processes? It seems like an obvious place to start, really. Do you want to go? I'll go to you, Brenda. I'll go back to you first. If that's okay. So what is strategy to you?
To me, strategy is having a plan in place about how you're going to move your business from where it is now to where you want it to be in the future. And for me, it's about that kind of high-level planning. I'm not about having a 500-page document business plan. It's being really clear and really focused about what key areas you need to do to move your business to wherever you want it to be.
Perfect. Yeah. Chris, do you want to go, Chrish Iredale?
Yeah, I'm right with you there, Brenda. I think less is more in this top line plan, and we have a template. In fact, I passed out a copy, thank you, for Michael on LinkedIn yesterday to help a young lady that was planning the next stages of growth in her business. 2 pages, and that would look at 1 year, 3 year, and 10 year. That's for an established business. But if we're in startup mode, I would be looking at 1 year, 2 year, and 5 years. So ultimately, we will look at what's required in every quarter of the trading period, but also every now and then looking at that longer term vision and making sure that we're heading in the right direction. Yeah. And by the way, a two-page business plan, very simple, but not simplistic. And we've had successful bank funding on the back of just a 2-page document.
Yeah. Absolutely. Less is more.
And also something that can be used visually as well on the wall and communicated through the business.
Absolutely. Yeah. What about you, Chris Parker? What about yourself? What does process and system mean to you?
Well, I mean, from a strategy point of view, I echo what Brenda and Chris have both said. But for me, I guess it's like a bit of an equation. It's putting a plan together where all the different elements fit together. And nothing outgrows one. You don't get one area outgrowing another, and they become linear. They're all working together, from your sales and marketing right through to your operations teams. Actually, but in a way that no one's pulling against each other. Not, you don't want things pulling in different directions. So, yeah, it's putting it in a way that everybody understands.
Yeah, that's a great point, I think, Chris. And it kind of follows on to the next question I have about why is it important to have these things in place? So I think you kind of covered it there, but is there anything else? Why does it matter?
Well, I think it's about getting the balance right. If your sales are outstripping your capacity in your business, you all of a sudden you're going to really start. That's where you start creaking, and that's where problems start occurring. And the opposite way around, if you spending but you've got no sales and no income coming in. So it's about getting those balances right and making sure that the processes are in place to actually underpin all that as well.
Yeah.
And on go on, Chris.
So thank you. I was going to add, thank you, Brenda, is that often I find that business planning can just be the revenue based, turnover, gross profit, net profit. Fantastic. FD, very pleased with that. Owner of the business, very pleased with that. But also, what are some of the other key measurables that we're looking for? What are the average sales, amount of clients? How many widgets are we looking to shift? What's a good contract look like? And if you can get some other simple metrics in the business that come from every leader of the business, sales and marketing, operations, customer service, finance, who's making those decisions? What are their key measurables? And then everybody's lined up throughout the divisionally or around the leadership team to ensure that we're ticking those key measurables and goals. So if we only have finance goals, the whole business is going to be focused on finance, but yet you'll find your service levels are going to drop massively if we're just about getting the money in.
Do you find then, Chris?
For example.
So do you find with that, do you think that is quite often the person who's driving the business, so the owner or the founder, they probably have an area of the business that they feel, shall we say, the most comfortable with, or they have the most expertise. Therefore, they're kind of, a lot of their focus is on that area, and then the other areas get neglected to an extent. Whereas, I guess what strategy is bringing all that together and making sure they are all equally aligned.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, just to build on what Chris said, I've developed quite a few balanced scorecards for businesses, which is absolutely about making sure every part of the business is represented. And it can stimulate great debate at all levels of the organisation. And it is Chris Parker's finding that balance.
Absolutely. Anybody else on that point about kind of what it is?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. That's again a lovely point there, Brenda. The scorecards from each department, so important, having balance. And again, who owns this plan? So again, going back to the owner-manager order model, if it's just one person's plan, the MD, the leader, everyone will follow that. That will be the strong message. So again, if it's just about revenue, the whole business is going to be focused on revenue. But by bringing in the head, a leadership team, the head of each division, they can have their say, what's important. And that, again, moves into the scorecarding to ensure that you have that balance, not just on scorecarding, but also the balance of who has input and who's responsible and has ownership for the plan.
Absolutely. We've had a nice, concise point from David on LinkedIn about process plus input plus something equals output. I like it. It's straight to the point. I guess that's kind of what the points you guys were making earlier about when it's come to business plans and strategy and everything, being concise and being simple actually is really useful, isn't it?
There's an element to that just to add on to what that comment was there, that there's other elements that you add into that who's supplying it and who's your actual customer at the end of it, because they all have that they should all have that input, and those customers can be internal, those suppliers can be internal, so it could be employees within the business that have still got the input into that entire process and those inputs and outputs. So what Chris and Brenda have said is absolutely spot on. It's having everybody with those inputs having a say in it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And if it all cascades down through the business to individual performance as well, and it's all aligned, and people understand how what they're doing fits that bigger picture. And at the end of the day, what gets measured is what gets done. So you need to make sure you're driving the right behaviours as well throughout the business. You're not measuring people on something that's going to drive their own behaviours, or going to sell products because it makes revenue, but it's not the right product for the customer, or whatever it is.
Yep. Brenda, taking that one step further, what gets measured gets managed.
Yeah.
So again, some visibility there. And what we're talking about here also is the silo mentality, actually, without having a coordination. So how often can you make a great quality product but not ship on time, or it costs way more than the client is willing to pay? So those silo is breaking down the silo mentality. And I know Chris Parker touched on this on his last presentation, really the coordination and communication between all getting the foundations, actually, Chris, is what you talked about there. And this really, this type of business planning and process and procedures is foundational. If you don't get it right in a small business, then how on earth can you scale? It will fail.
I mean, as that growth happens and as that strategy grows, you then you do have to get into more granular detail over it. You know, what can you produce? What is the maximum number that you can produce with what you've got? And I'll guarantee that anybody that hasn't put any thought into it is probably only getting 60 to 70% maximum out of the capacity. So that's when you start getting into that more granular detail of really putting some proper KPIs in place and some proper measurements where that does drive the business properly, and allow that to drive the business, because everybody's online with it, everybody works with it, and they all know it, and they've all had input into it.
Yeah, and if you've got those right KPIs as well, they should always be lead indicator, and they should flag when you're about to approach if you've got a capacity issue or whatever issue you've got, rather than tell you when the damage is done.
Yeah. Brenda, what's your process then for, you're talking about KPIs and scorecards. So what's your process with a leadership team or a new business to debate and agree on the scorecards and measures, KPI measures that they need on a week by week, I guess, and monthly basis? Yeah,
it's people like to think if they've got metrics on the scorecard, it makes them important. So it's trying to make sure it's taking up a level to the ones that are actually going to drive decisions. So I tend to speak to them all individually first, then gather the whole list of metrics, and then try and take them up a level. So they're not operational. They can have their own operational scorecards if they want, but in terms of the strategy, it's maybe your top 3 or 4 for each area. And the hard thing is getting them all to decide what those top 3 or 4 are. I also hold people accountable to them as well. So every KPI has a name against it, and that person's then accountable for that measure.
We have a really similar system, and we call that a dashboard. So the owner of the business or the leadership team, they can look at their daily, weekly, monthly metrics, and it allows them to see that, yes, we're on track, we're heading in the right direction, and we can make decisions based on factual data. So we know where we're going. So if we're behind our numbers, we can make a decision as a team. If we're ahead of we can accelerate some of our plans. So it's almost like the fuel in the tank that is driving the business on its vision, the plan it has on its journey.
And there's a bit of a mindset.
If you just, sorry, I beg your pardon. If you're just running the numbers on the financial level, i.e., say just looking at the bank account, we could be saying, well, we're doing incredibly well. We're traveling at great speed, but we don't know where we're going.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
Yes. So we've had. Sorry, Brenda. We've had a nice comment from Sarah actually about a point you made. Sorry, I know this takes you two off screen a little bit, but Sarah made the point about business balance scorecards for business strategy should then filter down to the performance management of employees. Now I know obviously you did mention that, Brenda, which, as you can see, Sarah quickly corrected herself. You must have said it at the same time. So that's great. But actually, this point feeds into the next question I have, really, which is all about people involved with the process. Because I think with anybody, when any kind of business strategy, developing plans and things like that, I think it's often taken by the people at the top, shall we say. But from your point of view, who should be involved in this? Who's involved in developing it, managing it, delivering any kind of business plans and strategies? So, Chrish Parker, shall I go to you first?
Well, when we were talking about business process, I would always say everyone on the coalface, or people, representatives from the coalface, should be involved in the actual building of that process. Make sure it's concise, make sure it works, make sure it's robust, and then that filters back up. So once you know that it works, you can get metrics off that. You can then filter it up a level and say, right, okay, well, now we know what we can achieve. Okay, we can put a KPI against that. Right, then take it a stage further, and right, we now know what we're at as a business, and we can work to that. But from a strategy and process point of view, everybody people on the coalface need involvement as well, or they need to help to drive it, not just top down. There's got to be a bottom up approach as well.
Agreed.
Yeah, Chrish, Iredale, anything else?
Yeah, and also it depends on the business model. Often in service models, for example, and more so nowadays, and this has been accelerated by COVID, of course, with remote teams, agile working, reliance on other stakeholders. So in manufacturing in particular, or retail, where it is granular and you can get people at the coalface, but equally in a stakeholder model business, key suppliers, key agents, people who are helping grow the business, people who maybe work on a temporary basis, absolutely should be involved in this process and be responsible and have ownership. So have a seat at the table, even if for example, even if you outsource your marketing and you have a marketing agency, bring them in for some of these stakeholder meetings and have them responsible, but also they can offer their advice. They're part of your team. And I think that really works really well if you can facilitate that.
Somebody made a really good comment in a webinar I did last week about even sole traders. Sole traders that are using VAs or marketing, they have to let everyone have that input. Don't treat it as a supplier customer relationship. Treat it as a business relationship where they have got involvement in your business. If you want a VA to do something or a business manager to do something, you should be setting that process. You should have that process in place and agree to it. So it works both ways.
It really does, Chris. When I work with small businesses in startup mode, we have an operations team, an accountability team across the 5 key functions of the business, even if that's the business owner wearing each of those hats. And of course, it is in startup mode. But then as you very quickly, it can happen with some businesses. I had a client who went from a single startup to having 10 staff in 18 months. So those hats were very quickly shared out and employed around the team. But also that did include some virtual roles as well. And if anyone outside of this would like, I can point them in the right direction of a fantastic book for working with remote stakeholders and employing virtual staff, which really helps you motivate and manage them.
Chrish, do you want to tell us about that book? Because I know I'll say we've spoken about it before, and I've read some of it. So please tell us about that.
I'll drop some detail at the end of the call if that's okay.
Perfect. No problem at all. Brenda?
Yeah, I just agree with what everybody said. Everybody should be involved in the process as far as possible, or at least representatives from each area of the business. And at a senior level, get them all around the table, talking about it together. And as Chrish has said, the coalface, get your customer-facing staff together in a room and get as much insight as you can out of them. The best strategies are based on evidence and facts and insight. So you need to gather that from every stakeholder, every touch point as well throughout the business.
I was just about to say, does that include your customers as well, potentially?
Yeah, if you've got any customer research, or if you don't, go on and get some.
Customer feedback is one of the best ways to drive your own business. Just by finding out what they want, what is that minimal viable product that they're after.
Yeah, always often see where people say, oh, it's great because 90% of our customers are satisfied. Right, go and talk to the 10% that aren't satisfied and find out why. Don't focus on the 90% that think it's great. So, yeah.
Thank you. So we've had another couple of comments, which is great. So from Simon, I think all of us know, totally agrees with, I think this was when you were speaking, Chris Parker. Key people in each department must buy into it and driven support from the top. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Simon. And also we've had a question from Adam. How does Agile play a role here, and what risks does this approach bring? Chris, Iredale, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks, Adam. Okay, I like to view Agile as people, just like you would recruit somebody into your team. So ensuring that you've got someone who fits with your culture, is very clear about your values, and also operationally understands how you operate as a team, whether you're together or whether you're global or disconnected by time, etc. It's having the right fit and clear expectations. So again, the book that I mentioned, this talks about being able to brief people who are remote, people who are not drenched in your culture because they're on site. So that's something that we really have to have a watch out with remote working. And also the clear expectation side there is because to ensure that they're very clear about what the deliverables are, rather than interpret it themselves, because they're not on site with everybody else experiencing it, and they're not at the next desk, so they just can't ask those questions. So yeah, clear expectations, and also ensuring for someone who is working with Agile is to set some tests along the way to ensure that a brief is being given and it's been delivered back exactly as it was. And if it isn't, that's fine, but being able to give feedback. So creating that feedback loop to help raise the standards, which would be exactly the same with an internal review.
I was going to add to that because I've done Agile myself, and I use elements of Agile within workshops that I do, and I do find it allowing people to have the input into those solutions as well. It just brings a whole new level to the improvements that you make, because they're on board with those solutions as well. That and I don't use Agile from an IT perspective. I use it from a continual improvement perspective, and I think it works so well with a lot of the lean and Kaizen methodology. It's fantastic.
Yeah, test, learn, improve. Get that loop going. Test, learn, improve, and you keep feeding back and moving it forward. And that's what I love about the Agile thing, is that you can actually improve things and make great changes very quickly into your business, rather than the traditional methods, which could take months before feedback came back in and improved the elements of service and product.
I use the plan, do, check, act model, which is the Kaizen model. But it feeds in the same. It's exactly the same thing. It's just constant loop. It's a constant loop of improvement, and you and then you carry on to the next stage. It's, they work very well hand in hand.
Okay,
Brenda.
From a strategic planning point of view, there's sort of different ways you can approach strategy, and in a very predictable environment, it's quite a classical approach. But because it's very unpredictable moment, then you need to be agile. You need to be able to adapt quickly and fast. And Chris mentioned culture, and having the right culture to allow that is important. There's no point having high levels of governance and committee structures and stuff when you need to be agile. So it's about empowering your people, as you say, that whole letting them sort of get ideas out there, test it quickly, get the feedback, improve it, and carry on like that. So you need to have the right culture in place to let that grow and let that happen, really.
Thank you, Brendan. That's great. So I guess I want to kind of just focus a little bit on strategy then, a business strategy, maybe for people who are either developing a strategy or building on what they've currently got. What are the common mistakes that you find people do, or what they do when they're trying to build a strategy? What do they maybe do wrong, and maybe some tips and hints on how to do that? So I go back to you, Brenda, because obviously I know this is something you work on a lot, like kind of common things or mistakes that people make around strategy.
I think because I work a lot with small businesses, I think their immediate thought is they're too small to have a strategy. I don't think they actually, a lot of people don't maybe appreciate that strategy is actually just really simple, and it's just about how you're going to do something and how you're going to move your business from A to B. And as we said before, it's not about having complex business plans in place. And I think just sitting down with people and just helping them, as I said before, just be really clear and focused about those key priority areas, and not get, from my point of view at that level, it's not getting bogged down in the detail. It's just having those high level goals in place.
So I guess what you're saying is it's not having a strategy, or they don't think they should have a strategy, and it's starting. That's the first thing they need to do, I guess, is try to put something in place. Yeah,
and sometimes you're successful and you evolve, and it's almost through chance rather than it being, actually that's what you've planned to do, and then you can kind of retrospectively go back and think about it, which might help you plan forward. But it's I think without some sort of strategy in place, you might just be floundering, and you're not really sure about what's working well and why, and what's not working well and why not, because it's just happening without you stepping up above your business and sort of looking down on it and giving it that view.
Absolutely. Chrish, Iredale, have you got anything to add on that? Kind of common mistakes?
Yes. Sometimes people find themselves as accidental entrepreneurs because they have an idea, they start a business and it develops and they may become successful. And you do make a great point there, Brenda, is that it can be an element or a series of luck or a good sequence of events. But then sometimes when the business model becomes under pressure, in particular with high growth, that can expose it. And Chris's point about not having foundations there, and then obviously the shakedown, or something happens in the economy, and we know that's on a regular cycle now for those of us that have been around long enough and through a few of those. So I find what really helps here is to have someone help you with your thinking, is to open up the mindset, is to set a specific day. And I'd like to talk to Brenda, if we have time on the call, about the frequency of scorecarding and leadership meetings, etc. But actually to dedicate some time to work on the business, come out of the business sometimes and get into a different environment and really start to think big. So, and when I say think big, open up that thinking. Think big within your own world, of course, but it's the idea of what's possible here. What are others doing in the marketplace? Have we done any market press? Have we looked at our competition? Competition's a fantastic thing because we can learn from each other. And I think really that is the starting point of the top line. And so it's a process that I really enjoy personally. That's one of my sweet spots, is just looking at entrepreneurial. What can this business do? What is its potential? Are we thinking up on a large scale? Is it happening elsewhere in the globe? That is often not a priority at all within the whole calendar of a normal business.
Great pause. Yeah, Chrish.
Sorry, before we move on, can I just quickly say, to pick up on what Chrish was saying, I think what I'm sort of hearing him say is, to me, strategy is taking yourself out with the refines of your own business and thinking about externally where those opportunities are and where those threats are.
Yes. Yeah. Being external to it rather than completely inwardly focused. So strategy may feel like everything that's in the business. Those are tactics, really. Strategy is, what's possible on a global level, without a doubt.
I think that's a really interesting point, Chrish, actually, about this kind of thinking big and what's possible, because I think that's maybe one of the things I experience speaking to people is they kind of put a glass ceiling on themselves. And that's not to say that everyone wants a multinational, massive, huge business.
Absolutely.
But if you're thinking big, it gives you the better chance to actually get to the point you want to be. And it might, that can be anywhere. It doesn't matter. Everyone's different. But it's the possibilities you can go with that by I think essentially thinking small. That's the result you're always going to get. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think the watch out there is that thinking big's fantastic, but also be careful what you wish for. If you want a lifestyle business and you want to work 30 hours a week and you can only possibly manage 3 team members within that, then okay, let's think big within that capacity. we've got to match our capacity. Don't think big and end up running a 150-person business, because that takes a very specific skill set and commitment. But it's thinking big within your own capacity, and again, having some help with that. And it's amazing how quickly you can open up some thinking. And I can give some examples of that. In that we've been able to help clients with new products. We've been able to help clients enter new markets. We've been able to help clients work globally, multi-currency, etc. We've been able to get some freedom in the business. We've been able to look at the employment model, etc. So it's, and I'm sure Brenda's done exactly the same. I think if you can spend some time opening up the thinking, and this for Brenda really is, we just touched on this earlier, is when you talk about scorecards, Brenda, is, what's the sequence that you use? We have a very specific annual sequence. Is it the same with your program?
The metrics in the scorecard would get reviewed annually to make sure they're still the right metrics, but they'd be reported on either monthly or quarterly, really, to make sure you're on track, and if any actions need to be taken to rectify whatever's going on, but as a review process annually.
Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Okay.
So go to, sorry, Chris, go for it.
Sorry. So with our system, there is a weekly leadership review, and that is just over 1 hour every week. And clients say at first we struggle sometimes to get that commitment hour in the diary, but actually once we've been through a few cycles of meeting, that hourly meeting really sets them free for the rest of the week, because as a team they've connected, they've reviewed their scorecards, right? We've got a strategy, we've got tactics in place now, we know where we're heading for the next working week. We have a monthly review one-to-ones, so that is much more focused on the divisional leader or the head of the department. Quarterly, we have a quarterly review. So what we look at is the last 90 days. We measure the performance of the projects and the scorecards, because there's larger projects as well as the day-to-day measurements, scorecarding. That is a full day in the diary for the team. And we do that off-site where possible, so a break from everything. There's some time for emails in between. And then the annual review, depending on the size of the business, this can either be 1 day or sometimes 2 days. And this again is reflecting back on the whole year, ensuring each project has been delivered, and if it hasn't, whys and wherefores, etc. And then resetting on the 10-year vision or the 5-year vision, depending on which phase we're in. So every year we look further out again by another year. We don't rewrite the strategy, but we do reset it. We learn from that year. Maybe we need to pivot at this time. Lots of businesses are pivoting right now, and their annual review will certainly have some changes for the following year. And then rewrite the 1 year, 3 year and 10-year plan, and then load up for the next quarter ahead. Those are the cycle. That's the cycles within our program.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris. Chris Parker, I've not come to you on this point yet about the kind of common mistakes and things like that. Yeah, so good to hear.
Well, a lot of it Brenda and Chris have already mentioned, but yeah, that not aligning it is always a real key problem. It's all good and well having one financial goal, one major financial goal of growth and everything else, but unless that assimilates through the business, it doesn't work. And when we talk about the business meetings, the one-to-ones and all that, that's a big fundamental that I look at, making sure that those communication levels are in place, because without that communication, how do you communicate strategy? And it's putting all that and the processes and the error proofing and everything else in place to make sure it works, and just putting the building blocks in there, because strategy will not work without those building blocks.
Absolutely, Chris. Now, I was going to come back to you actually. My next question, Chris, if you don't mind, is about processes. And so kind of what are the consequences for businesses, and what have you seen of inefficient or poor processes? What can go wrong?
I think the biggest thing that goes wrong is actually people not understanding it. They're not concrete. You've got to put concrete processes in place to make businesses. so that there's no ambiguity, so there's no chance of sort of grey areas. If it's concrete, it's in place, everybody understands it, and it's got to be trained. You can't just say, oh well, that's the process, right? Well, what you need to do is actually break it down into its component parts as well. Is each part of that then trained out to every person in the business, so everybody understands it? It's documented in a way that everybody can find it. And if somebody else comes, one person leaves, another person comes into the business, they've got a means by which to be trained in a consistent way. All that has to come together, and it's a way of actually mitigating a lot of the problems that you find then with the strategy elements, where you're actually keeping it consistent throughout the business. So yeah, the biggest problem is not actually writing the processes down and actually people understanding those processes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if I can add to that, Chrish, again, this is often what happens is small businesses that develop very quickly, they don't have the process, procedures, systems, and a manual. So again, going back to a business in startup mode, where one person is in every key seat, is developing a one-pager of processes, also responsibilities, key tasks, etc. And as people join the business, of course, if you've got the start of a manual, you can then recruit, coach, train people into that business.
Yeah, I encourage building a business manual. Build it, and it doesn't have to be paper. It can be electronic, but build up all those little intricacies as well. Those little checklists that people forget about, because those are the ones where somebody forgets to order an A4 ream of paper, and all of a sudden you've run out of ink cartridges. Those little things are the ones that actually do have major effects on the entire business, because all of a sudden you can't print anything. All of a sudden you can't. You might have a pen to write something down. Those are little. They might be so minuscule of a thing, but a checklist is just it's a wonder of a thing. Sometimes having that written down of exactly what you need to do, and it does sound really sort of over the top, but it's right. It works. It makes sure that part of that process never breaks down. Or if it does, you know how to fix it straight away. Yeah. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay.
Anything to add on that, Brenda?
Not really. I think both Chris's have kind of covered it well. I did have a thought, but it's gone now. If it comes back, put my hand up.
I think really, Michael, the overall thing here is consistency, and often I talk about the McDonald's franchise, and we've all been in those chains globally, but you receive the same service even though the person in front of you may be of any different mix and demographic. Actually, you will always receive the same consistency, and their manual is actually a series of diagrams. There's very little, so it's not text heavy, and so that means it's very quick to be able to pick up. This is how we do things right. This is good. This is not acceptable. And somebody new into the organisation can look through the playbook for their section, whatever it may be. Now, if that can work at that level, and then people that are doing well because they've got the stars and they've gone through the playbook and they've delivered it to a certain level and they've been passed off. Well, I know we're not running McDonald's as in our SME businesses, but actually just to think about that and think about how can we make it that simple to pass information of what's acceptable, what we're aiming for as a business, what we'd like to see, the behaviours, etc., and what we don't want to see. And that's really where the one-pagers start for me.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's how when I encourage as they're building this business operations manual, actually screenshots are the best way. Screenshot with a circle, press this button, dead easy. Especially when you're starting talking, computer systems. If you're talking a whole computer system, you've got to learn how to use. That's going to have multiple different menus and everything else. So just build an area of manual around that. And that then builds out. It builds it up into a training manual, and you can use that, and you can reference back to it whenever you need to. It's very quick and easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of work, and it's simple. In its basic form, is screenshots put on a Word document.
Or sometimes video. Some of the tech companies that I work with, and they work obviously with remote workers again and agile workers, they use an app called Loom, and they can video themselves. So in the corner, a little bit like what we're doing now. So you can see the full screen, and in the corner you'll be talking through and saying, right, we're going to use this application to do our order inventory, and I press this button here, and very quickly you can build up a library of these Loom videos. And you'll see things like this. I mean, if you think about, if you want to learn how to do something, one of the first places to go is YouTube. Try and see if someone else has already put a video in place. But why not bring that kind of thing into the way that you go about building up a manual in your own business?
Oh, absolutely, Chris. I mean, I know I've mentioned this to you before about the book. There's the book Simple, Logical, Repeatable, which is a fantastic book. It's based on the McDonald's model. And I know it's something I've read a lot in recently. There's a lot of books I've read, and they often reference the McDonald's way of doing it. It's a very common way, let's face it, it's a hugely successful franchise business, and this is what they do. So,
and again, Michael, another great book in that area, and I know we've touched on this before, is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. An absolute foundational cornerstone of starting a new business. And that, again, talks about the franchise model and starting your own manual. And he lays that out very simply, how those can be just one-pagers, and also a contract in place for the key leaders in the business, or the leadership roles, as we've talked about earlier, and how you can write a contract out for yourself just on one page, what you're committing to in that business year.
So we've had Fliss as backed you up on Loom, saying it's amazing. She likes that. So thank you for that, Fliss. Simon's actually covered a point that we touched on a few minutes ago about kind of the potential issues of not having correct processes. Is duplication, inefficiencies. Obviously, I know Chris Parker, that's a very area kind of you very much work in, isn't it? So absolutely. So that's spot on. So kind of before we finish, I just want to kind of, it was interesting. When we've been going through this conversation, I've wrote down 3 points that have seemed to come up with virtually every question we've got, and that is having, whether it's your processes or your strategy, to be visual. It needs to be there. It needs to be seen. It needs to be consistent across the business, and everybody has to be bought into it. So that might be whether it's your customers, your clients, your employees, whatever it may be. And that seems to be a kind of a running theme through all. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. To answer that, Michael, we've got health check. Regardless of your business model, regardless of the size of your business, if this is something that you want to get into, we have a series of health checks. In fact, Chris and I were just looking at these the other week, and these will help you diagnose, health check where you are right now. It's a very simple questionnaire. You can whiz through it. You can use it either just the leader of the business or put it wider through your team, and then we can give you some feedback on the scores of where you are with your strategy right now, and it'll give you some very quick wins, some areas where obviously if you're scoring low in certain areas, we can give you some hints and tips on how to focus on those areas and get on the journey of improving your strategy.
Yeah, I mean, Chris gave me a lot of help on that, because I've done one more from a continual improvement operational point of view. So it's very much more aimed at the frontline teams and their operating, and how they operate. But in a very similar context, it gives you a score of what those little things that you might be missing within the business that you really need to focus on.
It's a quick audit of where you are now and the steps that you could take to improve, and that's free, by the way. So if anybody would like a copy of that, no problem. Then please contact me and I'll organise those for you.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that offer. So that's a great place to finish, because what I generally asked, the last thing is to just kind of go around and everyone kind of explain if someone wants to get hold of them, find out more about what you do, contact you, that kind of thing. where's the best place to start. So I'll go around as I'm looking visually. So Chrish, Iredale, do you want to go first?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I've managed to fish out the book that we talked about. So it's a book called Virtual Freedom, and the author is Chrish Ducker. And this is really helps with managing and instructing and recruiting remote workers, agile workers. The only watch out with that, I would say, is the technology that's used in that area updates very quickly. So the book, the applications that it talks about have moved on very quickly, but the bones of it work very well. So yes, if anyone would like, is what we're saying, contact details, is it?
Yeah, just kind of where to get hold of you, find out more about it.
Thank you. So obviously, please find me on LinkedIn, or if someone would like to drop me an email, it's chris.iredale@thriven.co.uk.
Thank you very much, Chrish. And then Chrish number 2.
Yes, so you can email me at chris@combined-minds.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook and various other places.
Fantastic. Brenda?
Unmute myself. Okay, yeah, so as Chris and Chrish have said, I'm obviously on LinkedIn. You can email me at brenda.etchells at Carduus Limited, which is CARDUUSLTD.co.uk, or please go and look at my new website, which is brendaetchells.co.uk. On there, I've just launched something called the Knowledge Club, where there's an awful lot of insight and articles and tools that you can use at your leisure just to really start you thinking big picture and strategically about your business. So that's a free resource which is there for any members to use. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Fantastic, Brenda. Thank you. And thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. You answered lots of questions there, which has been fantastic. Just in case if anyone can't find any of the guys, do contact me directly, and the Northern Affinity. I've got all the details, so we can pass on if you need it. Finally, just thank you to you guys for your questions, who's been watching, but also obviously thank you to you guys answering. It's been really useful, and I'm sure a lot of people taking a lot of things from that. That's it from me. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.